Welcome to today's SLiTHER, everyone. This is kind of a follow-up on one we did way back in the years of the pandemic. We were joined in the midst of that by two college seniors at that point in time, and now they're off in graduate school. So we have Reilly Gwynn and Sydney Towell, and just kind of inspired by getting to see both of them in the past year. Reilly came back to her alma mater and gave a great talk, and I ran into Sydney at the Organometallic Boarding Conference this past summer and said, you know what, we really need to check in with them and see how they're going. So with that, I'll let you two just tell us a little bit about where you've been since graduating from your undergrad institutions, and then we can dive into some other things. Don't fight
You
over
can
who goes
start,
first.
Sydney, Sydney, if you want to start, you can.
Great. Yeah. So I was at Harvey Mudd in undergrad. It was in Southern California, and I chose to go to grad school at UNC Chapel Hill. So since undergrad, although I guess I wasn't in person my entire senior year, so I really more moved from Pennsylvania with my parents back and then down to North Carolina as opposed to from California to North Carolina. But yeah, so now I'm in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and that's where I've been hanging out for the last 4 years or so. So I guess me and Reilly are both now fourth year graduate students. And I switched my focus from undergrad. I was doing a lot of inorganic research and ending up on computational research because of COVID. And now I do pretty much solely organic synthetic methodology with an eye towards polymer application. So completely different.
So, since undergrad, I had gone to Lafayette College and I was working on inorganic chemistry, mostly late row metals. Um, I had been working with gold, and then coming to Virginia Tech in 2021, I was kind of testing the waters out, seeing if I like organic synthesis or inorganic chemistry. And I found inorganic chemistry was where my heart was at, and I joined an assistant professor lab where I worked on metal ligand multiply bonded complexes of first row transition metals. Since then, the assistant professor did choose to kind of step away from academia, so I transitioned into a new lab that is focused on medicinal chemistry and then the development of synthetic organic methods with kind of an interest in boron chemistry. You'll see a lot of that coming out of our lab. So I've had a bit of a unique journey in grad school.
Okay, very good. So when we did that SLiTHER, gosh, like almost 4 years ago, it was in January. So you were, if memory serves, like just starting to hear from schools you'd been accepted into, or maybe it hurt a little while, or were getting ready to hear. Um, what was the remote choosing a graduate school experience like in hindsight? Do you feel jealous at all about, current students that are able to actually visit in person?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I feel really jealous of students that are able to visit in person, students that were able to have normal senior years. Like I had to go back to like have my graduation ceremony at Harvey Mudd a year later. And that it was a great experience to get to see all my friends that year later, but it was also like one of the hardest times of my life. Um, and then not getting to visit schools in person made choosing really hard. Actually, I got kind of lucky in a way because I was living at my parents' and I found out from UNC pretty early that I got in. So we were able to road trip down and like just the us quarantining and see UNC's campus at least from like walking around outside during winter break. So that was really nice. But I didn't really get to know or learn much about the department culture, I would say in any of the departments. And that's something that I think I really lucked out on. And I didn't realize how lucky I was until I've talked to other people. Um, and I don't think it's really possible to get the like perspective on department culture just from talking to people over Zoom for 30 minutes or even a day. Yeah.
So, back in January, I had already heard back from Virginia Tech, and they were hosting both one in-person weekend and then also a virtual Zoom meeting, like to meet with some professors privately and students. I was not able to go to the like official in-person uh visiting weekend, and that was largely because Lafayette had very strict rules since we were back on campus, and to maintain that we had to kind of apply in order to leave campus, and I wasn't able to go that weekend. The virtual recruitment was a little bit strange, but it did, they put forth their best efforts, and I did learn some stuff and get to meet some graduate students. But what was most helpful is I also drove down on my own after receiving like my first dose of the vaccine, and after some of the graduate students were comfortable meeting with me in the lab that I was interested in. So I was able to visit kind of unofficially very late on where I had already accepted. So I knew I was going to come here. And so I guess that's a little bit of a different timeline than students are seeing now. And one thing that I was really jealous of was that all the new students coming in, Virginia Tech would host a visitation weekend for them. And, you get kind of spoiled and you get to meet the department. And I wish I had some of those experiences because a lot of my choice of school was driven off kind of factors other than the location and the department culture because I wasn't able to get a good sense of those things. So I think that's where like the major difference is lying now because people get to visit more schools and maybe take a little bit longer in their time to choose which one they're going to. But I made a pretty early decision based off kind of more realistic factors. Um, yeah, so I do feel jealous sometimes. At least I would have liked to meet some other, you know, professors at different departments. And I feel like I was kind of cheated out in that way.
That's fair. For sure. Makes sense. Um, so you then had to kind of both up and move, trying to factor it in, maybe close to the same amount of distance, strangely enough. Um, what was that like? Just like, okay, I'm plopping into an area that I really haven't gotten to see too much, and then meeting incoming first years that you probably never really got to hang out with. Then
Yeah, I think here there was like a lasting effect for maybe like a year and a half or so, and at no fault of the department or anyone, but people were so nervous coming in after the pandemic, and then we were still required to wear masks and social distance for at least the first semester and a half before it got more lenient. Um, our cohort wasn't able to get as close initially, and a lot of the cohorts in front of us thinned out, not because of some sort of like academic underperformance, but because people had other obligations maybe to their family, or they just decided they didn't want to be in grad school during the pandemic, or maybe, they needed the money to enter, so they entered industry early. So the department kind of suffered socially for a few years, and they had to put a lot of effort into kind of getting the community back together. Now it's a lot better. We have stuff like coffee hours, we have a graduate student senate, and our program coordinator is actually able to set up events like, I think she just sent out an email for a craft social, things like that, that require you being in close proximity and indoors to others. I think that yeah, so not meeting the first years was tough. I feel like we didn't really get close until maybe after our prelims because that's when we were able to be physically closer to each other for the first time. Um, and it was hard choosing where to live because I was talking to my roommates virtually and I had never seen the area really until after I signed a lease because there's also kind of a housing crisis down here where there are so many students and this college is expanding so fast. You have to kind of sign your lease early if you want a place to live.
Yeah, I would say some of those same things definitely applied to my experience, although some were quite different. In terms of like meeting my cohort, I it seems like UNC had less specific or stringent guidelines. So I still got to take classes with my cohort, and I still got very close with some of the people I was taking classes and TAing with and that sort of thing. Um, and so I was definitely able to get close to some people in that way. Although I have just heard, like anecdotally from professors, that the department has like never quite felt the same since COVID. Like students are just a little bit more detached. Professors just know like less students that aren't in their labs, or maybe they're not serving on their committee. Like it's just not the same closeness across the board. But for the move down, what I did is, and I think this is probably going to be true, pretty much every visit weekend you get assigned a host. So even though ours were virtual, I still got assigned a host. So I just messaged my host and said, "Hey, do you know some places people live in the area?" And she slacked me or emailed me at the time, like options of places to live. And I knew I wanted to live on my own. I had a really unique moving experience because directly after my senior year, I had a pretty big knee surgery and wasn't able to walk until about a week before classes, or like I had to be on campus to start TAing. And so I was just like, I don't really want to navigate trying to have a roommate and, having to explain that to them. So my parents, I'm really grateful, like they helped me move in because I couldn't carry all those boxes at the time. Um, and I was really specific when I was choosing where to live, that I was like living somewhere on a bus line where the bus dropped me pretty darn close to and from the chem departments, which isn't super challenging at UNC with where the chem department is. So I lucked out in that regard. But the whole prep process for me was like very strange because I was immobile for a lot of that summer.
Mhm. And you're both transitioned from relatively small undergraduate institutions to really, really big institutions, which is intimidating enough. But then you were doing it while still in the midst of a raging pandemic. Um, how did that experience go? Was it nerve-wracking, just being surrounded by that many people suddenly, or?
I loved it. I was like, why? And I love Lafayette, but I was like, why didn't I do this earlier? I don't know. I feel like it's so much more. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but it was, I thought, a really good transition. But also, maybe if I didn't have the experience of Lafayette, it would have been more jarring. At least I was going up in rungs, it almost feel like. When your department's so small and as a grad student, you're really interacting with them mostly. I feel like it's small community inside a big community. But I loved the jump from a smaller institution to a larger institution, especially because I feel like the more hands-on training in undergraduate, and especially getting to learn from like you directly, um, that helped a lot with my transition here because I felt very independent. But I really like having the large school and the larger town aspect, even though Blacksburg is still really small. So Virginia Tech in itself is super large, but Blacksburg is a very small area. So maybe some aspects are a little bit similar to Lafayette because Lafayette's a small school in a big area. Big.
Um, yeah, I would say like a lot of the time I don't even notice the aspects of UNC being so much larger. So the chem department at UNC is maybe 250 students. And there was about 250 students per class at Harvey Mudd, a little over that. So a lot of the like feelings of the department size kind of to the school size felt about similar to me in a lot of ways. Um, a huge a huge reason I applied to like bigger schools and bigger programs was at the recommendation of Adam, because he had said like when you're in graduate school, it's an absolute pain to need instrumentation or help and not have people in your department that are able to provide that to you. Like you don't want to be stuck in the position where you need to run, you know, cryo NMR and you don't have the equipment to do that. And then you have to organize going off campus. You have to like rent out other people's equipment that's like tripling in price, tripling in time and effort on your behalf. Like there's so many benefits to working in a larger department for those reasons. And so I just kind of took him on his word because I had never worked in that large of a department and I'd seen maybe some of the cons of that at Harvey Mudd just because there were some things I couldn't do there that, even if I wanted to, like we can't buy a MALDI-TOF at Harvey Mudd. That is a multi-million-dollar instrument for very, very specific purposes. And it's huge. Like they don't have space to fit it in the labs there anyways. Versus at UNC, we have one. And so when I need MALDI-TOF, I can use it. So, and I've definitely seen those benefits throughout. But I don't know, if I go to work in academia, I think I would not go to work at some like super large institutions like this one. It just seems a little overwhelming, to be a professor at them.
Okay.
I also liked that there was a lot of stuff to do or like a lot of instrumentation available at Virginia Tech. But actually, kind of going off of that, I do think even at these large institutions, there's kind of like a discrepancy between what's available to you depending on where you go. Like Virginia Tech offers a lot, but it's interesting because when I was working for Deanna, she was kind of the standalone in inorganic chemistry. We were working with such different instrumentation and such a different type of inorganic chemistry. And being an assistant professor lab, it took a lot of collaboration to send out for things like Mossbauer, and we didn't have an operating squid at the time, and we didn't have an EA set up within the glove box, and we didn't really have any other groups working solely in glove boxes, um, which that is just like an interdepartment thing, but there's still a lot of collaboration required, and I think that is something that maybe students want to consider, because like you considered it heavily when, or like heavily when you were deciding. So that might be something that somebody wants to look out for, like in their department and consider, especially picking which lab they were going to join, because joining an assistant professor lab, if you wanted new instrumentation, you have to go through a startup fund and you have to submit, from my understanding, a lot of paperwork, so, like figure out what company you're going to buy it from, justify that. And we actually were going to like purchase a Mossbauer, but the process took so long, um, that the instrument became unavailable to us. So, I don't know. I think that was something to consider, but you make a really good point with that. Because if you are looking
Oh,
to have everything like in-house for yourself, you should definitely consider that in your choice.
that's actually like a huge reason I chose UNC and like where I chose to apply was places that had strong, robust polymer programs because that is not ubiquitous across all like of even the best graduate institutions. A lot of them only have one or two polymer chemists. And I wanted to go somewhere that had more than that because for the reason you said, my lab has one type of instrumentation, another lab has that same type of instrumentation. It's a GPC, but on like a different solvent. So if my polymer isn't soluble in the solvent from my lab's GPC, I can just pop over to that lab and run it, as opposed to having to send the samples out. All of the labs that do polymers together applied for the MALDI-TOF with a grant, and we're able to say because we have all these labs together. So I think that's kind of what you were getting at, Reilly, where it's like it's really nice if you go somewhere, even if you want to work for a specific professor, to make sure the department at large has the support to do the type of research that professor's doing. Like that
Yeah.
professor's not a standalone doing that research because that means also I go to my friends in other polymer labs all the time for advice on how to do things that I haven't done before. Um, and it's very helpful to not have to like dig through all the literature on my own to do, simple preps or procedures that I can just talk to somebody else that's done it before and get like feedback in 10 minutes, where it might have taken me 3 hours to figure it out by myself.
Yeah, it did feel a little lonesome doing that kind of chemistry and not having many of the other like inorganic labs doing similar work. But actually, it's funny because our department, if I did polymer chemistry, I feel like I would have been set because there's such like a polymer heavy program. Um, but yeah, no, I ran into that issue a few times, especially when Deanna stepped away. All of a sudden, it became like dire for me to send out these samples and get these collaborations like finished because after a certain point, I wouldn't have the money to like send out these samples. That's unique, I think.
Little different for sure. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, oh, do you need a wambulance because you didn't have EA in the glove box? Good grief. Must be
Well,
nice.
she used to have that is
Okay.
why she,
Uh-huh. Uh,
she had a setup in graduate school and she had a Moss Bower, she had a squid, and she had an EPR that did cryo temp. And so she also had a large adjustment coming here because all of a sudden she was without, you know?
all the toys. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Understandable. I think Sydney hinted at it a tiny bit, so it seemed like a natural transition. Fourth year, the end is somewhere in sight. The train is coming down the tunnel. Do we have any thoughts at this point in time where what we think the next steps might be? This is not a committal to the rest of your career, but just curious.
Riley, if you have any thoughts, you should go first, because mine are very unclear still.
Like career wise, like post this.
Career wise, I'm not asking like where are you going for dinner tonight, but what happens at the end of this journey?
Yeah. I'm afraid to be too bold with what I say. But um, I think I'm going to start applying to postdocs or postdoc positions because I want to try my hand at going into academia at maybe a larger institution, which it feels extremely bold to say, but you have to manifest what you want, I guess. So you have to say it confidently. I'm working with my professor now to kind of understand what my best chances are, how to proceed, because it's all very new to me. And previously with Deanna, I guess she had been through the process herself, and that was it. Um, he's had a little bit more experience, and that was a benefit to moving into an established professor's lab, which was an absolute must for me when I found out I was going to have to transition labs. So I was also considering PUIs because I really did enjoy my experience at Lafayette, and I think it was really influential, especially given I was probably the first person in my family to do anything like this. I wouldn't have, I don't know. It's like without you having asked me, to join my lab, like, are you interested in research? I wouldn't have known what to do, and I wouldn't have ended up in grad school. So I'm trying to work through whether I think I would like to work at a PUI or a larger institution, but I do think I'm leaning towards a larger institution because I'd love to be able to do my own research in the same sort of inorganic chemistry I had been doing, which is also why I started to lean towards, okay, if I could do it, I'd want to do it because the type of inorganic chemistry I've been doing with Diana is not something you're going to run into in industry as frequently or at all. Um, so I'd love to continue to do that. And also throughout my graduate school experience, maybe I'm rambling, but I um I found that my favorite parts were the writing and presenting. Um, I loved the science communication aspect. I had a lot of fun writing the NSF. I have a lot of fun talking about new chemistry ideas and talking about my work. So I think that academia gives you some more space, from my understanding, in pursuing stuff that you would like to continue to pursue your own interests and then communicating them. And I've heard there's a lot of grant writing, so maybe I would enjoy that.
Somebody's got to. Yeah, no, that's again, fourth year, you don't have to have the future plans locked down. Those sound like some good thoughts and good steps. All right, Sydney, the pressure's on.
Um, yeah, this is something I get asked with greater and greater frequency. and I have less and less of a good response. I like to say. So with polymers, it's a little different because there is an abundance of industrial positions, and a fair amount of industrial positions in polymers can feel more research focused. And so they're a different flavor of research from academic research. So it's often like more patent or property driven. So instead of trying to create a new polymerization technique or that sort of thing. You're maybe like trialing additives and like percentages of stuff to get your ideal property sets out. But there's still a lot of research from what I've heard, or research options. So yeah, I'm considering industry. It's hard to like not think about like nice paychecks and um you know not having to worry about tenure and like postdocing and then getting a really hard academic job and that sort of thing. Like getting an industry job is not a walk in the park, obviously, but um it's hard not to see those upsides. And it is to me really inspiring to see like the thought of your product or the thing you worked on actually making it to a consumer in a reasonable amount of time, like 5 years, as opposed to possibly never. That being said, similarly to Reilly, I have found like my favorite parts of my research is talking about it with others. I wouldn't say the writing portion for me, um, but presenting it to others, teaching others. I have worked with a high school student, an undergraduate, just even talking to other graduate students and like helping them out or them helping me out is some of like my fondest memories of grad school. So I'm not saying I'm not interested in academia. Um, but I definitely have a bunch more soul searching to do because at least from a fourth year perspective, the academic road seems very long and hard. And I think that's why a lot of people choose not to go down it because it's really intimidating thinking I have to finish my PhD and then I have to like get this great postdoc to set me up. And then I have to go through this job hunt that, from all accounts I've heard, is grueling um, and quite challenging. So, yeah, I'm still really undecided, and I don't know when I will decide.
I
But
think,
That's okay.
yeah,
yeah,
I think because I was really nervous to ever speak out loud that, oh, well, I would love to have my own lab because you don't have confidence in yourself as a scientist for those first few years in grad school. You feel like a big imposter. But I think kind of some of the appeal about it and talking to my new professors, if you try to take that traditional route to academia, the postdoc, and you do it right after graduate school, there's no shame in bowing out. You find it's not for you. You'll still be, even better off towards industry and you have to do the best you can. If the best I can can't get me into a postdoc that, would set me up for, later success, or if I can't find a job in academia, it's not like I will be on the street, you know? And so I
yeah,
figured if it's something I really like doing, I don't think it'll be painful. I mean, maybe painful to a certain extent, but I don't think I'll like truly be suffering if I give it my best attempt and if there's no shame in not being good enough for one of the toughest jobs out there. So, um, that was kind of my perspective. And at the end of the day, if I go to apply for postdocs and I'm like, I'm not feeling it or something, or I can't get what I want, I can hopefully turn to industry or a secondary plan. Um, but that's
I
what
guess
actually shifted me. That and the fact that the writing stuff is my favorite portion. So I see a lot of promise there if you go into academia.
For sure. Yeah, I guess I have like a pro con list on both sides. And the pro con list, it feels like they're the inverse of each other. And so I just need to weigh out, I guess, what pros are more pro and what cons are more con. Um,
Yeah,
but yeah.
I will say I'm way less of type A thinker like that. I think I'm more of a, yeah, I'll see where it goes. I'm gonna just go into it. So I
I
think that might help me out.
never saw any evidence of that. Um, so, I mean, you're both doing the right thing, getting as much input from people as you can. And, you know, you're right, Riley. Who knows? It's you might think one thing and it changes later. That's kind of part of the adventure, the fun part. You never know what the next day will hold. So, um, in thinking back all these many years ago, to early 2021, is there anything you know now that you wish you had known then? Can you reflect upon?
Um, so wait, what was the question? Is there anything we wish we would have known in 2021?
Yep, that you know now. Like, gosh, I wish.
Um, I wish I would have known how unpredictable life in grad school would be and how resilient you have to be towards it, especially given my circumstance. Like quite literally anything can happen.
Well, I hate to tell
Um,
you this, but it's not just grad school. It's life in general is
I'm
fairly
starting to get that
unpredictable.
feeling.
You just never know what's going to happen. And, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't know in 2021 that there was going to be so much that changes so fast and that I didn't really know that you could just like try it out and get like move forward or, you know, take a day off and then move forward. I don't think I was as good at that when I was 21 versus 25. Um, I don't know if there was anything else I reflect on and wish I had done it differently. I feel like I reflecting or looking back, you have to not be so afraid to, go down the wrong path and come back, or you can't be afraid to not do something. Just kind of full send yourself into grad school if you're going to go, because otherwise, I think it's emotionally defeating and you're not going to get as much out of it. So I guess those are the two main things I've learned in the last 4 years.
Yeah. I think those are like both really good things. Especially the like becoming emotionally resilient. I would say a lot of the stuff that I've really learned or like wish I knew, people were telling me when I was an undergrad and when I was going to graduate school. I remember people telling me that or people giving me advice when I first started as a graduate student, but it didn't stick. Like a lot of lessons you need to learn and internalize yourself. A perfect example of that, kind of tying into the resilience one, is I remember my boss in my first year of graduate school was telling us, like, you need to at least somewhat disconnect from the science. Like, you cannot, the science cannot be how you value yourself as a person. Because if you value yourself as a person only based off the success of your science, that is like setting yourself up for failure at some point in graduate school because there's always going to be a time where the science stops working and you need to keep going anyways. And he was describing it like as a boat on water. And so like instead of having really high highs and really low lows and like riding super big waves, you get better at like just controlling it and like just, riding along a flat lake as opposed to like a big waves from the ocean sort of thing. And when he initially said that, it was in group meeting, and I was sitting back. It's like, that's insane. Like, I don't ever want to be emotionally disconnected from my science like that. Like, I want to be excited about when science works. And I've noticed over the years that I am like less excited when things work, but also a lot less heartbroken when they don't. And so I lose maybe some of the positive, but I gain so much in not having all that negative. Um, so that was like a big one that I think about a lot to this day because I see then younger graduate students have that maybe same transition. And then a piece of advice that I remember from my sophomore year physics class, the very first day, my professor said, nobody fails this class because they're not smart enough or not good enough. People fail this class because of other things that are happening in their life that take over. Um, and I think the same is true for so many things in life, but also graduate school. Like, we're all people outside of being graduate students. And most of the people I know that have dropped out of the program dropped out not because they couldn't do it, but because of other circumstances, be it that they just realized once they were in it that they didn't want to do it. And like that's okay. That's totally fine. And better to realize that early and cut your losses than be a fourth year and hate your life, right? But like people also drop out for family reasons, for health reasons, like financial reasons. There's so many things at play, and like I haven't met a graduate student that thinks when they're going in that they're going to drop out and leave. Like everybody when they first start thinks that they're going to make it the 5 years and get that PhD. And everybody that leaves is not leaving because they're not smart enough or they're not good enough at chemistry. They're leaving because of things that like affect their chemistry and bleed in to them not being able to be successful.
Okay. No, that's all good things to be thinking about, reflecting on, and I kind of like the take home message. Leaving is not a failure. It's just okay. This wasn't the right path for me. What's next? Um, Certainly, I've had those kind of conversations with students a few times over the years, and I think that's an important message people need to hear. Um, so we're kind of coming up towards an end. Is there anything else either of you would like to share? Think I've missed or just burning on you?
I think so.
You think we've hit everything we're good with? All right. Well, I want to thank you both for taking a little time to chat with just me. But I do think there's going to be great value to this to the community as we get to check in and see how you're doing. And who knows, maybe in 4 years I'll hunt you down and see what exciting things you're up to, and we'll check back in uh, on that. So with that, I'm gonna sign it officially from recording.